It's no secret that men in the modern world are struggling, and oftentimes immensely. We see men struggling with things like addiction, with a loss of meaning and purpose in life, self-harm, alcoholism. It doesn't matter what we're talking about, we see men struggling more than ever. And the real issue here is that on the left and the right of the political sphere in the United States specifically, we're not really seeing a good model and a way forward for the way that masculinity should be. And in this video, I want to break down why the left and the right have very, very bad problems with giving solutions for young men and what we need to actually do to solve the problems that young men are facing in this world. So without further delay, let's dig into it and break it down. So I'll talk first and foremost about the right's solution to this, because I think that's really important. And I made a lot of notes on my phone about this because I don't want to misspeak or anything. So I want to make sure I give you exactly what I thought about ahead of time coming into this video. Now, on the right, we see masculinity is often framed as a return to the 1950s, right? And what we see with this is that, you know, the right wants to take things back to a previous time in life. And honestly, from a true just ideological perspective, from a political way of looking at the world, that's what conservatism is in a lot of ways. It's either you want to preserve what is or return to something in the past. That's very much what conservatism is. That's not even from a political sense as much as it is just an ideological sense. When you look at what it means to be progressive, that means to move forward, to create new things. You believe the world can be better by moving forward and the innovations and so forth, right? I'm not really here to debate the realities of the right and the left from that standpoint. I just want to talk about it as it pertains to masculinity and why men are struggling. So this idea of the 1950s is the very typical idea in which a lot of our grandfathers probably grew up, where, you know, the men ran the household, the women didn't work, and, you know, there was a very rigid hierarchy, and the patriarchy was very much involved there, as it has been for the last 3,000 years, and that men kind of dominated everything, right? They dominated society, they dominated the house, all those different things. This was a deeply flawed thing because in a lot of ways it was very flawed for women. It didn't give women access to being able to leave the house, to leave the kitchen, whatever you want to say, and go be and do whatever they want with their lives. And I'm not here to talk about women and the feminism movement and all this different stuff. What I am here to talk about is how this idea for men is not necessarily something that is really going to serve you. Because even back then, there was a lot of flaws with society and the way things were ran, because a lot of men did not have lives that were fulfilling and leading to, you know, peace and prosperity within a man's own life, okay? So that's the first end of this with the right. That's a lot of what their idea is. And if you look at a lot of the voices on the right, there are these guys that are very like brash and harsh, and they give off this display of masculinity as if it's something that is to be, you know, domineering, and it's power and it's control over other people. Now, the problem with this is that true masculinity is not about control over other people. It's about control and mastery over yourself. You know, Socrates had this idea, and I'm going to botch this quote, but the philosopher Socrates, many thousands of years ago back in Greece, he said basically that the extent that an individual could be free was the extent to which he has mastery over himself. Meaning that if you want to have freedom in life, you must discipline yourself. You must have mastery over yourself. The problem is that in a lot of ways on the right, as much as people talk about personal responsibility and so forth, a lot of these ideas that are put forward are still about controlling other people and, you know, knocking down people's views that don't, you know, align with yours, or people that look different, all this different stuff, right? There's a lot of issues with that. But on the left is a totally different issue. And the issue on the left is that, you know, basically your existence as a man, your masculinity in and of itself is the problem. Now, I am generalizing both ends of the spectrum here, but if we look at both ends of the spectrum, we do see these things being true, and they're espoused by lots of people, whether it's, you know, YouTubers or actual figureheads in the political movements that are saying things like this, okay? And sometimes it's not directly, it's through what I would call like our dog whistles for things to appeal to these kind of things. But oftentimes on the left, we will see, and we do see people literally saying like, you are the problem as a man. Your existence as a man is the problem, right? And so what both of these ends of the spectrum give us are these really warped views of masculinity, right? Like I said, on the right, we see this idea that, you know, masculinity is about control, about, you know, domination and so forth. And like there is aspects to masculinity that are that, and that's true. Just like on the left, there is some truth that men in a lot of ways have made society harder for a lot of people. But I don't think it's for the reasons that the people on the left are stating. I think it's actually the same problem that exists in both ends of these camps. It's that we don't have the right role models. We don't have them in our houses a lot of times growing up with our fathers. We don't have them in terms of like friends or brothers we can look up to. We don't have them in terms of political figures we can look up to or men in society to look up to, because masculinity is broken. It's broken in every capacity, because the generations that came after my grandfather's generation, which was the World War II generation, they became weaker because society was better, right? So there's that quote that goes something like, hard times create strong men create easy times create weak men, or whatever it is, right? And I actually do believe in that a lot, because if you just look at yourself as a man, the hard times individually in your life are what build you. You can even see this in the gym, right? What is the sets and the reps that build the most amount of muscle for you? It's the hardest sets that you have. It's the sets that you take the furthest. It's the reps at the end of the sets that are the hardest to get through when you go to failure. That is literally what builds the most muscle, okay? And that same thing is true with your character. And that same thing is true on a sociological perspective for men as a whole. So what, in a lot of ways, the issue has been is that we have been brought up in a world where we were raised by a generation of men that had an easier time in life when they were graduating college, when they were graduating high school, economic opportunities and everything. And that's not a bad thing, but the problem is that that has created a generation now of men that are lost, that don't have the right role models to look up to. So on both ends of the spectrum, there's very, very different answers to these questions. Now, what I want to do is give a nuanced answer to this, because truth be told, I have some very progressive views, and I also have some that I would call are like more libertarian and so forth. But the idea is I don't fit into either political camp very easily, and I think that allows me to see things from a more nuanced perspective, okay? Now, what I have seen working with men, studying men, analyzing men, seeing men in my life, my family, my friends, etc., is that men in a lot of ways today are lost. And that's how I started this video. I said that at the beginning of this video. And the reason they're lost is because, like I said, they haven't had the right role models. The reason this is particularly problematic is because when a man doesn't have the right purpose and mission in life, when he doesn't have an understanding of why he's here, who he is, and what he's doing, this creates what I like to call a void. And that void, and I've talked about this in other videos, a lot of my videos, is that the void gets filled with a bunch of different things, right? We can see this being things as simple as fanaticism for a sports team, right? Like, I grew up in Pittsburgh, and that's where I'm filming this video right now. I also live in Tampa. And the way that people live in Pittsburgh versus Tampa is extremely different, right? In Pittsburgh, there's not a lot of things to do. A lot of people just drink and go to Steeler games and root for the Steelers, root for the Penguins. The Pirates, not so much, because they're not a very good team. But the point is that there's a lot of fanatical sports fans. And I know people here that literally will have their day ruined, their week ruined if the Steelers lose a game. That's 100% true. Like, their entire purpose and meaning in life oftentimes is directed into the success and the failure of their sports teams. That's a problem, because you're not then creating your own life and your own wins in your life. And you're living, almost like through the lens of other men. And that's never a good thing. The other thing that could fill this void is even sometimes worse: addiction. That could be to alcoholism, that can be to nicotine, that could be to fentanyl, that can be to gambling, that can be to porn. There's a number of different things that can fill that addiction. And the reason those things fill the addictions is because we as men need dopamine, right? We're wired for dopamine. So the reason we're wired for dopamine is because for years and years, you were rewarded, I'm talking tens of thousands of years, for going out hunting, killing animals, getting resources, building and creating communities within your tribe, conquering the other tribes. So we have this instinctual nature to crave dopamine because that's the reward system that exists in our minds, our bodies, etc. And what often can fill that in our modern world is there's a lot of easy, cheap, quick dopamine, stimulants, nicotine, porn, gambling, you name it, okay? And what these do is they give you a false, inflated sense of success, fulfillment, of, winning, and really you're not getting any further in life. Like, even if you win $10 million gambling, your life is still just as empty. That's why you see people oftentimes who win the lottery, blow all that money. They blow the money they win because they didn't get it through a means of actually things they built in their life, okay? Now, obviously, I don't need to tell you that some of those things are worse than others. Like if you get addicted to fentanyl, there's a highly likelihood you're gonna have an overdose and you might die. I literally had a best friend named Mike who died of a fentanyl overdose. I walked in and found him dead in his apartment. In a lot of ways, that is what has led me to understanding these deep-seated issues that men face, because the problem is very layered. It's very, very layered. And what I don't think a lot of people understand is that a lot of times the things that draw men towards fentanyl are the same things that draw men towards that fanaticism for sports teams. It's the same thing that draws men toward being radicalized, right? That's another part of this void, is that men get radicalized by either sides of the spectrum because they go chronically online and they get in Reddit forums or 4chan or whatever because they don't have that purpose and meaning in their life. And that, my friends, is the solution to this problem. You see, most men are walking around in today's world, and I see it constantly through the men that I coach, with trashed hormone levels. They have tanked testosterone, they're sedentary, their DHT levels, which is another important male hormone, is tanked. They don't sleep well. They're stressed out all the time. They're depressed because of all these things I'm talking about, especially and including their testosterone levels. And because men are in a lot of ways what I would say like castrated or neutered in the modern world, and in many ways, you can see this through our declining sperm counts, testosterone levels, etc. over generations now, is that there is this disconnect between what I would say is the spiritual calling of man, like the divine calling of men, and the biology that we carry inside of ourselves. And those things go hand in hand. This is why I coach men and teach men through body, mind, and spirit, because you need to develop all three of those, right? Your spirit as a man, there's a sense of this need, as I said, which creates the void in a lot of ways, of purpose and meaning in life. That even when you look at people that are struggling immensely, if they have enough of a why, if they can generate meaning and purpose for their lives, they can endure pretty much anything. Because our spirit as humans, as men, is made for that. We're made to suffer for something greater than ourselves. And that's another important part, is that this mission, this purpose in life has to extend beyond ourselves, right? Like for me, my mission and purpose in life is doing exactly what I'm doing right now. I do this, I help men, I create these conversations about society and so forth. I do this through my band Tethra and music. I help people with lyrics, right? I do this through content on social media. I do this through my systems and programs I sell men. I do this on mindset and masculinity calls with men. I do this in a variety of ways. Those are just the vehicles that my purpose gets carried out in. Too many men get caught up in this idea of like, oh, you know, I have to be a doctor to take care of people in the way that I want to. Like, you could be a doctor and also make videos on YouTube. You could be, you know, a songwriter and also be a nurse, right? Like, I'm just thinking of things off the top of my head. There's lots of ways to help, and there's lots of ways to serve, and that's the thing. Men, we get this sense of meaning and purpose when we serve a mission that's bigger than ourselves. But we can only connect to that mission when we have a couple things satisfied. We have a body that's well optimized and regulated in terms of our nervous system, right? We're not constantly in fight or flight all the time. We have well-regulated hormones that are optimized. We have a body that's strong and durable and has been tested. We train ourselves in the gym. We train ourselves in the sauna and cold plunges and things like this because we choose that stress resilience. We choose to build it. Eating well and feeding yourself the right food as well. We then have a clear mind. When our mind is clear, we can be disciplined, we can be focused, we can be locked in, have that mental resilience, and we can exert emotional control. Remember when I said before, the right gets things wrong in a lot of ways because it's about control over other people. Emotional control is over yourself, your emotions, your fleeting impulses and your desires. That sovereignty, that mastery you have of yourself is the most important thing as a man. Now, beyond this, when you get into the spirit, there is a divine masculine calling I wholeheartedly believe is in every man. It exists in every man that has lived, lives currently, and will live. It's this idea that there's something in you that's calling you to do this. Like, for example, what I'm doing right now, I have felt this in me since I was like 10 years old. I didn't know exactly how, and I've spent most of my life trying to figure that out. But this impulse has been in me my whole life. It was right in front of me. I tried all kinds of different things, different businesses, a CBD business, a supplement company, a t-shirt brand. I tried all these different things and none of them really clicked until I started doing this work, right? This YouTube channel is new, but like I'm talking about in terms of my Instagram and my TikTok and Snapchat and like the men I'm coaching, the music I'm making and stuff. It's all seen major increases in the last, I would say 12 months because I've locked into that meaning and that purpose in a way that I never was able to before. And so the antidote to the despair that men feel, the problems that men have in the modern world, is to lift them up. It's to initiate them into their highest potential. And it's to teach them that. And there's a framework for this, right? There's a framework you can follow for that. And the idea is that you build your body, you build your mind, and you lean into that calling in life. And you know what happens when you do all those things? Because a lot of the reason men are struggling is because they're not getting what they want. They're sexless. They don't have opportunities with women. They don't have the job opportunities they want or the business prospects. They don't have the respect they want. But the thing is, when you build your body, your mind, when you lean into that spiritual calling in life, those things take care of themselves. The money finds you. The opportunities find you. The women find you. You become a magnet, right? That's what I literally teach men. And I built you a free training where you can learn how to do just that. So make sure you go down into the description under this video, click the link for the Magnetic Effect free training. I'll walk you through that entire process, how you can do that, how you can build yourself into being that kind of man. Now make sure you're subscribed. Thank you for staying with me through this whole video. This is a very dense topic and I'll probably make a lot more videos about this because this is probably something I could talk about for hours. But I just want to give the overview. I think that, you know, the right and the left's getting these things wrong and we need a new way of moving forward. And I want to create the conversation around that as much as I can because I'm tired of watching men struggle. I'm tired of watching people like my friend Mike lose their lives. I'm tired of watching men that are hurt other people. I'm tired of watching men that are struggling harm themselves. So I will see you in that next video. Let's keep building. Let's keep growing as men.